So there were some good numbers there. There's a lot of really fun numbers around FoodPanda. You have 2,500 employees now. You're in 500 cities, tens of thousands of restaurants. Any other big numbers you want to throw out there?
No, I think you got the numbers. Huh?
Okay. I mean, so today we were going to talk a bit about doing business in emerging markets, e-commerce, marketplaces in these places. We're in Northern Europe right now. A lot of the companies out there are also based here or in the States, but there's obviously a lot of scope to do business amongst what we at Quartz call the next billion, the people who are coming online now, mainly mobile, this sort of thing. And so I wanted to just ask you some questions about that to begin with. Having been in some of these, pretty underdeveloped, some quite wild markets, I mean, what are some common misconceptions or mistakes that you see Western companies making? Your company's based in Berlin. Probably a lot of the advice you get comes from Germans or Brits or Americans.
Yeah, so we're based out of Berlin. We have our IT department in Berlin. We have our marketing department in Berlin. But we do business only in emerging markets. Emerging markets are for us Eastern Europe, Southeast Asia, Africa, South America, and Middle East. And we started, as you've mentioned, 3 years ago, and are now in those 41 markets around the world. And we face challenges in those markets that are very, very different to those that probably most of you see in the Western world. In those markets, you can't just go with a software product. Currently, the people in India, for example, are just starting to adopt technology and internet. We're talking about an internet penetration of 30-something% and a smartphone penetration that's most of that. So over there, it is a lot about bringing people online, capturing them right away, and then dealing with legal uncertainty, dealing with operational uncertainty. A marketplace for restaurants in Western Europe works that a restaurant on the platform digitally gets an order and brings the order to a customer. Very easy. That's what we thought at the beginning was working in the emerging markets as well. But it's not. The operational complexity is huge. Over there, you deal with traffic. In India, it can take you 3 hours to drive 10 kilometers. How are you ever going to get food hot to the customer over there? We're dealing with political uncertainty. We were active in the Ukraine. Suddenly, the protests on Maidan started. Our office was right next to Maidan, and half of the employees were Russians. So we had to pull out overnight from Ukraine, unfortunately. On the other hand, there are great opportunities. In India, you have a couple million smartphone activations per day. That's some numbers we dream of in the Western world. When you talk about the legal risks in those markets, and getting a visa for a female to Saudi Arabia, quite impossible if you don't go with your husband to Saudi Arabia.
Yeah. And so you were talking about online there, but a lot about phones. Are you just skipping desktop entirely in some of these markets, just going straight from offline to smartphones, essentially?
Yes. In those markets, you leapfrog every technology straight to the Android phone. You have cheap Android phones that you get for $100 US in those markets, and that's your target audience there. You don't talk about iOS. Our iOS share in the emerging markets, it's 5 to 10% of the traffic. The rest is Android and Windows Phone, surprisingly large in some of those markets.
And I imagine the data footprint of your app needs to be quite small too. Data doesn't flow as freely in emerging markets as it does here. Is that right?
Yeah, we are used to 4G. That's quicker than our Wi-Fi. In those markets, we talk about 2G, 3G. That has a lot of implications for your technology team if you consider going to emerging markets. Meaning you have to reduce the data significantly when constructing the app architecture. How can you give a good app experience if you have a 2G coverage? And these are thoughts that we need to consider, that we had to learn as well over time in those markets.
What's like the one biggest thing that you've learned recently? Because the company's only 3 years old. And what do you know now that you wish you knew in late 2011?
I think the biggest learning is operational excellence that you need in those markets. You need, as a marketplace, you need to own the fulfillment in those markets. You can't rely on your suppliers to give that experience that we are used to in the Western world. However, the customers in those markets want that experience. They want to have their food in half an hour. They want to have, if they order at an Amazon in India, they still want to have their products within 2 days. But the Indian Post typically takes 3 weeks to deliver a product. So as an e-commerce marketplace, you need to set up your own operations and fulfillments. And that's something that we underestimated, where you've been mentioning that we have 2,500 employees now. 75% of these employees work on the operations fulfillment side for us to make sure that we have and give the right experience to the customer. Because the population is young in the emerging markets, but they're extremely convenience-oriented. That's how they grew up. Over there, you can get everything delivered. You take a taxi, you don't have your own car. You have your own employees typically at your home that cook for you. We have one fun story from the Middle East. When the oil price went down, actually our food orders went up because people couldn't afford their private chef anymore.
And so in many places you are replacing the local market or a restaurant that might be even down the road from somebody. I mean, do you worry about homegrown competitors now? I mean, at one point you told me you entered 10 countries in 10 weeks. Based in Berlin, this company comes in, you try to grow as fast as possible, but that kind of service and loyalty doesn't just happen overnight.
No, you have to earn the loyalty of the customer, and you earn that with great experience, quick delivery in the food segment, and you earn that with a local touch to your brand. So we have, even though we are in 41 markets, we have people on the ground in every single country that ensure that we touch upon the right topics for the local population. Food is the most personal, most culturally driven thing you buy and eat 3 times a day. So that culture, that local experience is core for us.
Yeah. And so we can kind of step back a bit and make it perhaps a bit more relatable to some people. There's a lot of companies out there that are sort of marketplaces of some sort or another, as you are. And what you were telling me before is that you see yourself as a managed marketplace, that this is, again, a big lesson that you have, that you can't just roll out software as brilliant as it is, as lightweight as it is. It needs to be managed.
Yeah, and I talked about the customer experience in a marketplace. And for that, you need to have a managed marketplace. So we have active coachings for our restaurants that do their own delivery. And if restaurants can't deliver that experience that a customer wants, we either take them off the platform, as you do in the e-commerce with inventory management, or if it's an important restaurant, we support them with our own delivery and give them our riders that then deliver the food for them to ensure that the customer has the great experience. Because we talk about loyalty, that's only achieved with a very good customer experience. And you need a loyalty within a marketplace to become profitable. Marketplace, you talk about small margins and you don't turn profitable on a customer on the first order.
Right. And this doesn't sound like a technological solution to me. This sounds like you're hiring locals, you're learning from other restaurants. Is this somewhere where, like, learning from Pizza Hut or Domino's or something like that in the Western world can be applied, maybe more relevant, or is it still, is the transmission still not as clear as that?
No, I think you can always learn from the best. And Pizza Hut grew with a 30-minute delivery guarantee with great customer service. On the other hand, we have challenges. In Indonesia, there are no postal codes. So how do you define an area for a restaurant where it delivers in Indonesia? So we invented postal codes and area names in Indonesia. People now actively search for our defined areas. Google Maps doesn't work in Russia or Kazakhstan. So you work with Yandex Maps. In Thailand, you work with Nokia Maps. And still, it's something where we probably only cover 75% of the streets properly with GPS coordinates. And these are the challenges that you face in emerging markets. It's not the clean white solution that we always draw up on a whiteboard and imagine that's working. In emerging markets, it's getting your hands dirty on the streets.
Yeah. And there must be some markets that you said that in Ukraine you had to pull out. There must be some others that you've maybe not even entered, or some that are there others that how quick are you to pull the plug if it's not working?
I think that's a core of our culture. You mentioned the 10 countries in 10 weeks that we expanded to in the last year. And but then you need to monitor very closely. Do you get the desired traction within a defined time frame, and have clear milestones? If you don't hit those milestones, then you investigate what's the reason and you pull out again. There could be legal reasons, that the employment law is very strict and you can't really employ people. Could be reasons that the food delivery is very regulated and you need special permits to deliver food, which you need to bribe people for, and then it still takes a year. Then we don't do those markets, or we pull out again. And that's the very core. If you do quick scaling up of markets, to pull out quickly again.
Yeah, I mean, speaking of quick scaling up of markets, this is like any rocket internet company, which FoodPanda is, but also I think particularly yours has grown just at astronomical pace. How do you, and it's quite a far-flung platform, how do you measure and monitor what's going on in these operations with something that's growing so fast?
I have very centralized data and controlling. So every morning we check the progress for every single salesperson on the ground. So we use our friends from Salesforce for that. Every morning in the Berlin headquarters, 2 people control all 500 and more salespeople that we have.
Jeez.
And then we do follow-up calls. The management, I call 5 salespeople a day and ask them why they underperformed yesterday. Why did they only sign 1 new restaurant?
How does that go over the calls from Berlin in the mornings? Do you have a good rapport with them, or is it more?
They always
how much
love
carrot,
it when
how much
I call.
stick? Okay, right. Yeah, fair enough. And I know that there are some of the markets that you're already profitable, even a few years in. I mean, to what extent you called it a winner-takes-all market? These are very low margins. You need to have huge scale. When you do start to see those profits, when do you shift gears and think less about growth and more about sustainability and profits and that kind of thing? That must be a tricky thing to manage. Is it flipping a switch? Is it obvious?
No, I think there are 2 elements to it. First, you need to realize that you're dominating a market and you've gained that position of a winner-takes-it-all market. Once you realize that, you have to adjust the team. You need a different team to manage than to grow entrepreneurial. If you grow extremely fast, there you need the very execution-focused, very hands-on, very pushy people. While once you are in the domination phase, you need managers that can deal with relations.
How do you know when you are dominating? Is there a hurdle? Is there a number that you have internally, or
no? For domination in our industry, I think it's a little specific because food is very impulse buying. Now you decide you're hungry, and then you think, where do I get food today? Either I cook myself, I go out for dinner, or I order. If you decide I order, then you should think about FoodPanda. Once we have that share of mind and top of mind awareness, then we switch gears.
Yeah, and switching gears from just growing, not at all costs, but growth being the main focus, to that kind of consolidation and profitability. Does that require, beyond the mindset, does that require new people?
It could mean new people, yes. It mainly means, though, different KPIs. Marketing, you don't optimize on customer acquisition costs anymore. But marketing, you optimize on ROI. And you reduce payback periods.
Yeah.
So it's more a mindset change. Sometimes it's the right person already on the ground. Sometimes you need different people.
Yeah. You were mentioning the sort of roles to something about salespeople and account managers. That was...
Yeah, salespeople, typically at the beginning when you grow, and you grow very aggressively, you have a sales team that's 90% focused on getting new restaurants on board, acquiring new suppliers. Once you're in the stable phase, you switch that 100% and go 90% account management, what we always call the farmers, and 10% hunters that acquire new leads. So that's then one aspect of changing the teams once you are in a dominating position.
Yeah. So we just have a few minutes left. Geographically speaking, what's left for you to do? What are some of the more exciting markets that you're already in, or that you have your eye on?
No, I think we are in the most exciting markets. Like in our markets, 5% of the population are above 65, meaning we have an extremely young population. We have an extremely small middle class at the moment, 30% roughly on average in our markets, which is supposed to grow. And we have a market spending of those middle class people and customers that's tremendous, the growth. So for us, we are currently in markets that are at 20% of the scale they will be in 5 years. So for us, it's not going into more markets. I don't want to be in Western Europe or North America. We have additional challenges in emerging markets. We can charge higher commissions than in the Western world because it's more complex, and we have a higher barrier to entry. And in that sense, no need to expand to other markets.
Okay, got it. And so, just lastly, where are you off to next? What in the Ben Bauer World Tour?
Tomorrow morning, Hong Kong, then Singapore this week, and Russia, and then to my team in Berlin again. So I think that's one of the other drawbacks of a very international company. You spend a lot of time in the plane. At some points, you know airports better than your own flat.
Yes, indeed. Well, but it's very good for business, it sounds like, and all the best in the future, Ben, and thanks a lot for talking to us.
Thank you.